So what if the single biggest barrier to economic opportunity in America's most vibrant cities isn't, I don't know, Wall Street greed or taxes, but something much more, well, mundane?
Something like neighborhood parking minimums.
Exactly. Or building height restrictions. I mean, high rents are this enormous source of stress for millions of people, but who's really to blame?
That is the big, provocative question right at the heart of the book we're breaking down today. And it really forces you to reevaluate how a lot of people think about urban poverty.
Especially people who consider themselves politically progressive. It just flips the standard narrative completely on its head.
It really does.
And for everyone listening, enjoy this bold new take on book coverage. We're doing an expanded analysis here, so it's much more than just a summary, which, by the way, we also include. This is really about examining how the author shapes his argument, how he builds influence, and how he earns or maybe loses your trust. We want to give you the tools to read with sharper insight.
So should you read this book? This should definitely help you decide. It's also, I think, excellent for aspiring writers.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to understand persuasive structure, and if you find the format valuable, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback really helps guide what we do next.
And one more thing, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation, and it's powered by Google's Notebook LM. We're using it for a deeper, more dynamic kind of book analysis.
Okay, so the book is Matthew Yglesias's The Rent is Too Damn High. It's a short, very powerful book arguing that these restrictive land use rule zoning local regulations.
Right. And specifically in desirable, often blue cities.
Yes, that these rules are the central human-made cause of high rents and, well, broader economic inequality.
The whole idea is incredibly streamlined. He's saying that high housing costs are not some mysterious, uncontrollable market failure. They are a direct political and regulatory problem.
It's the result of laws that make it, for all practical purposes, illegal to build enough homes where people actually want to live.
So the solution, he argues, has to be political. It's about supporting more density, what people now call upzoning.
Okay, let's unpack how Yglesias even positions himself to make this argument in the first place, because the timing here feels critical.
Oh, it was everything. The book came out just as urban rents in places like San Francisco and New York were just skyrocketing after 2008.
That feeling of economic claustrophobia was peaking. The phrase itself was already a meme.
And that existing frustration gave him a massive head start. Yglesias, who is already a well-known policy commentator, builds his credibility not just with academic citations, but by positioning himself as this pragmatic, numbers-driven explainer.
He uses mainstream economic ideas, simple supply and demand, without getting bogged down in jargon. It makes a potentially dry topic feel immediate.
But the truly clever move, I think, is who he's talking to. His target audience is that politically engaged, generally progressive city dweller.
The kind of person who is used to thinking about inequality in terms of like corporate greed or federal tax codes.
Yeah. Right. And so he strategically reframes the solution deregulation, upzoning, not as some libertarian pet project, which that audience would probably reject out of hand, but as an essential tool to reduce inequality and expand opportunity. He's aligning market-friendly ideas with progressive values. He's basically saying, if you care about social justice, you have to be a WeMB, yes, in my backyard.
That's powerful. But here's where he builds, I think, genuine credibility. He challenges his own political in-group.
He does.
He points out this really inconvenient truth that self-described progressives in these affluent, beautiful neighborhoods, the same people who vote for more social spending,
they're often the ones championing the restrictive zoning policies that protect their own home values.
and price everyone else out.
Exactly. By focusing the blame on blue city responsibility, Yglesias becomes this sort of internal critic. He's saying, look, we are the problem, but that means we can also be the solution. It forces his liberal readers to confront their own self-interest, which makes the argument much, much harder to just ignore.
Okay, so let's shift now to the structure of the argument itself, because this is really where the book's persuasive power comes from. It's just a relentless problem-cause-solution structure.
And it's based entirely on simple market logic. The logical core is, well, it's pretty undeniable. The causal chain is just so clear.
Demand is high in successful cities. That's a good thing.
Right, because of what economists call agglomeration effects, the benefits you get from clustering people and businesses together. It boosts productivity, wages, everything. But then you have these stringent land use regulations.
Height limits, parking minimums, single-family zoning.
Yes, all these rules that artificially choke off the ability to build more supply.
And when supply is choked off in a place with nearly infinite demand,
The prices explode.
it's a man-made scarcity. It's enforced by law. And Yglesias really focuses on the specific mechanisms, the things that are often totally obscure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about mandatory minimum parking requirements.
Yeah.
Developers are forced to build, say, 2 parking spots for every apartment unit, even if the building is literally next to a subway stop. And studies show that building just one of those spots can cost upwards of $50,000, maybe $80,000 in a dense urban area.
Wow. So forcing that parking minimum just ensures that the starting price for any new housing is already way too high for middle-class or working-class people.
Precisely. These technical details, the parking, the setbacks, the density codes, these are the real invisible barriers. He drags those dry municipal rules out of the shadows and puts them front and center as tools of economic exclusion.
And the argument doesn't just stop at individual hardship, right?
Yeah.
It moves to these massive national implications. This is the so what for the whole U.S. economy?
Exactly. High housing costs don't just reduce a renter's income, they severely limit geographic mobility.
So if workers, especially really productive, innovative workers, can't afford to move to the big innovation hubs like the Bay Area or Boston,
Where their skills would have the highest return.
then national productivity itself starts to dampen.
Yes.
The entire U.S. economy is being constrained by these local zoning decisions.
And the policy implication there is profound. I mean, we spend so much time talking about federal deficits or tax rates, but this book suggests that these obscure local rules might be shaving a measurable percentage point off national GDP every single year.
It's like a massive, invisible economic handbrake.
It is. It slows innovation, it limits mobility, and it even makes environmental outcomes worse by forcing these long car-dependent commutes.
He really succeeds in translating this technically complex local law into an urgent argument about national growth. And since we're discussing how Yglesias structures such a rational argument, it's probably a good time to mention. If you're looking for inspiring reflection and rational thought on complex topics, consider checking out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel, and we offer AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. We really try to break down tough arguments just like this one.
Okay, so back to the book. While the simple logic provides the framework, he still has to translate this dried regulatory issue into a felt everyday injustice. It needs an emotional component.
For sure. And the emotional core is really the portrayal of high rent as this pervasive source of stress and lost opportunity. It taps directly into the anxiety of the urban middle class.
He uses these vivid, really relatable examples. You know, people being forced to leave cities they love, the misery of those endless commutes.
That feeling that only people who already have wealth can really participate in dynamic city life.
Yeah. That transforms it from an abstract economic problem into a personal story of exclusion.
And he balances that pain with a kind of aspirational optimism. He offers this hopeful vision of a future with denser, more affordable cities where more people can actually benefit from everything a city has to offer.
And the style just reinforces this perfectly. The language is informal, it's direct, it's occasionally a little cheeky. The title itself is basically a political slogan. It anchors the whole thing in popular culture, not some dusty academic debate.
He uses these concise chapters and very concrete comparisons, like looking at San Francisco's specific zoning choices compared to other global cities. It makes the abstract points feel real.
And that constant juxtaposition of what basic economics would predict versus what urban policy actually does is so rhetorically effective. It just hammers home the idea that this crisis is an avoidable human-made choice.
So this brings us to the book's overall achievement, I think. Its major strength is how it successfully reframed zoning from this niche planning topic into a central mechanism of inequality.
He made it salient for a broad, progressive readership that honestly probably never gave land use law a second thought before.
That tight logical chain and aligning deregulation with these egalitarian goals, arguing that more density is the most practical way to reduce inequality, it gives the thesis enormous power.
I'd say its greatest rhetorical achievement is persuading so many progressive readers that supporting more building and more density is a practical expression of their ideals, not a betrayal of them. And that is a massive, massive achievement in political persuasion.
But, of course, no policy argument is without its limitations. I mean, that singular focus on zoning as the main villain, while it's persuasive, it does gloss over some other pretty complex hurdles. What do the critics say?
The critique really centers on, I would say, 3 major points. First, while Yglesias is right about zoning, critics argue he underplays the rising cost of construction itself.
Right.
Even if you upzone a neighborhood, if the cost of labor, materials, and just the regulatory process like permitting remains astronomical, the new housing is still only going to be for the high-end market.
So if it costs $500,000 to build the basic shell of a unit, just allowing for more units won't solve the affordability problem for someone earning median income.
Exactly. The solution has to address cost drivers beyond just density. The second critique involves financialization.
You mean big investment firms buying up property?
Right. This growing trend where massive institutional investors treat housing purely as a global asset class, not as local shelter, their goal is maximizing asset appreciation, which critics argue complicates the simple supply and demand model.
How so?
Well, if the new owners are huge corporate entities, their primary goal is maximizing rental yields. They might intentionally slow down development or even hold properties vacant to control the local market price. That power imbalance isn't really addressed by a simple just build more mandate.
And what's the third major limitation?
It's the political feasibility. Yglesias identifies the problem, but implementing upzoning means you have to overcome this intense, hyper-local opposition, the NMBY resistance, and that's often politically insurmountable.
Because it's driven by homeowners wanting to protect their biggest financial asset.
Of course, you're asking millions of voters to accept a policy that they perceive, rightly or wrongly, will diminish their home equity. So the book is logically sound on the economics, but maybe a little simplistic on how easily that political knot can be cut.
So it's a hugely effective piece of advocacy. It shines a spotlight on a crucial, often ignored source of inequality. But it's not the final word, especially when you consider the force of global real estate capital and construction complexities.
Precisely. It simplifies the problem to maximize clarity and actionability. And that is exactly why it was so successful in starting this whole new conversation.
So what's the final thought for you to explore after all this? Given that this book so successfully reframed land use as a moral and economic crisis, what other seemingly technical local regulations, occupational licensing, building codes, obscure taxes, what other rules might be driving major sources of national inequality that we just aren't talking about yet?
You have to look under the hood. The details matter, and the most powerful barriers are often the most boring ones.
They certainly do. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. Subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and think rationally.